Hello everyone. Today I'm going to be going over principles of joy and why it is the true default, as well as the psychological and emotional reasons people choose to lie and how to avoid that in certain ways. Let's see where this takes us. We live in a day where skepticism is celebrated and where pessimism is considered realism. The idea prevails in life that reality is miserable, and that a wise practitioner will choose to expect disappointment and give up entirely on the possibility of joy in this life. But I'm here to suggest the idea that life is a joy, that greater knowledge is actually the catalyst for happiness, that the common proverb, ignorance is bliss, is full of folly, and that a true understanding of reality would only bring an abundance of peace, joy, purpose, and love into your life. Now, I'm here to explore both scientific and spiritual principles, backing the idea that happiness and joy are the true default, and that joy is a natural process that can be studied and replicated. As a dear friend of mine once said, it's all just physics. Now, the lessons I've learned here are presented suggestively and not explanatorily, and in all of your studying and listening, it's important to remember that truth is truth. Whether it comes from a professional, religious, political, or personal source, it is either true or it is not true. In other words, everything that is true is just as true as everything else that is true. And everything that is false is just as false as everything else that is false. And the reason I'm mentioning this in a conversation about joy is because comprehension of reality is essential in the pursuit of happiness. It wouldn't be far off to say that every sadness experienced in this life is because of a lie in some direction. If I were called to define happiness, put simply, I would say happiness is the emotional state of someone living in harmony with their circumstances. This being the case, it would be essential for a practitioner to accurately perceive their circumstances in order to consciously live in harmony with them. In other words, an accurate perception of reality makes it possible for someone to experience true joy. And especially in the world where we live, where everyone's like, your truth, my truth. What is the truth? That is the question. We live in a day, in a world full of segregation. We tend to separate our lives into multiple different worlds. Work life, school life, family life, friend life. This segregated outlook on life tends to create double standards and moral dilemmas that confuse our subconscious. Especially when the standard of morality expected within school life may directly contradict the standards of morality accepted in family or political life. And because of these split worlds, it's not uncommon for someone to live a double or even a triple life. They may live according to one set of morals from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. and another entirely from 3 p.m. to 11 p.m. And this moral contradiction is the opposite of harmony, and thus it will cause mental, emotional, and even physical stress, which results in perceived sadness, the opposite of joy. Now, let's repeat our definition of happiness. Happiness is the emotional state of someone living in harmony with their circumstances. So remember also that an accurate perception of reality is essential for someone to live in harmony with reality and with circumstance. The problem with segregated worlds and opposing morals is that one or both of them are sure to be an inaccurate perception of reality. So to illustrate this, let's just suppose a case. You're wearing a red blindfold, and we may debate all day long what we call the red blindfold or whether it is red, but the fact remains that the piece of fabric is covering your eyes. And people at school may disagree that the blindfold exists, especially if they're also wearing one, and people at work may acknowledge that it does. But politicians may create campaigns arguing about the necessity of the blindfold or the need to change the name of the red blindfold. But the fact remains, you're wearing the blindfold. And now let's suppose you're hanging out with your friends from school and someone tells you to cross the street by yourself. Now remember, this group refuses to acknowledge the existence of the blindfold. And they refuse to help you cross the street because, after all, the blindfold doesn't exist. And you should be able to watch for cars yourself. Maybe they've even convinced you that the blindfold doesn't even exist, or that it's safe to cross the street without watching for cars. You may, because of an inaccurate perception of truth, or because of social pressure, walk yourself right into oncoming traffic. And perhaps this isn't the best example, but it's good enough to illustrate this principle. An inaccurate perception of reality can have fatal consequences. Now, what is the evil motive in the first place? Reminder to look inward when I'm talking about this next part. If happiness is the true default, and if an accurate perception of reality helps everyone, why then do we live in a world of deceit? What would be the motive for anyone to contort perception of truth into a confusing fog? Well, there could be endless debates on this alone, religious, political, and philosophical, but I'm just going to stick to psychological and emotional. We are hormonal and emotional beings. This is a fact. Perhaps even the most emotional creatures out of all creatures on earth. And besides our most basic survival instincts that are needed in extreme situations such as fight or flight, there is also an instinct just as powerful but way less noticeable. The instinct to be socially accepted. This is a powerful drive that is absolutely necessary for the survival of our species. The family unit is the natural structure that arises from our reproductive process. And apparently early on in our creative evolution of our species, we became homogeneous, and the dance of male and female became essential to the perpetuation of our existence. All the other mammalian species are the same, but not all mammals have the need to stick together like we do. Not only for reproductive purposes, but also for safety purposes. One man alone can't stand against a lion, but 10 men could. So, on the instinctual level, being rejected by your peers not only means the loss of sexual fulfillment, but also the loss of safety and potentially an early death. Hence, we have a psychological and emotional drive to be accepted. And this drive is more powerful than your drive to tell the truth. A wise man would realize that telling the truth will lead to more acceptance in the future, but a foolish man only sees the short term and will likely do whatever makes his current situation better. So, going back to our red blindfold example, one of your classmates may know that you're blindfolded, but because of the instinctual drive to be socially accepted, they may join the others in telling you that you're not. The majority of people who lie are just like your friend who knows you're blindfolded. They want social acceptance and will join the crowd to receive it. Sometimes confusing and complex situations are the products of an evolutionary pattern when many small lies start to pile up and lead to an increasingly complex lie. Now, this is usually because of many participants who all agree for similar reasons to pretend like something is factual even when it is not. And this is like a domino effect. One lie justifies the next, and so on. But who started the lie in the first place? How did we get here? Why are people saying you're not blindfolded? And why does your friend find themselves in a situation like this to begin with? Well, where does the original lie come from? In order to use the same example, let's pretend that blindfolds cannot be taken off. You can't remove it. Or at least that very few people know how to take blindfolds off. So once upon a time, a long time ago, years before you and your friends had the traffic incident, some guy was messing around with a red blindfold, probably out of curiosity, and he discovered that he could put it over his eyes. And once he did this, he couldn't see. And remember, he couldn't take it off either. Very few people know how to do that. And at first he freaked out. He was quite miserable. And he started hearing, the voices of people talking to him around him, and they're like, "What's on your head?" Or like, "Can you even see with that covering your eyes? Are you an idiot? Why'd you put that on your eyes?" And he's struggling to get it off. So, but this is a very particularly important moment. This guy, let's call him Sid, who made the mistake of blindfolding himself, he has a choice. He is social by nature and wants to be accepted. He doesn't want to be looked at as an idiot. His instinct is to avoid that at all cost. And if he was wise, he would acknowledge his mistake and ask for someone's help. Maybe he can find somebody who knows how to take the blindfold off. But Sid, unfortunately, is not wise. He is too prideful and he is too concerned about immediate acceptance than he is about the eventual removal of the blindfold. So instead of saying, "Yeah, I made a mistake. Will someone please help me figure out how to take this off?" he says, "Of course I can see. I covered my eyes on purpose. I like it this way." And you can imagine the flood of lies that he has to continue to protect his reputation at this point. Because if the truth gets out, he's not just an idiot, but he's also a liar. And that for sure is going to get him rejected from society. So he keeps lying. Most people probably don't believe him at first, but they haven't ever seen a red blindfold either, so maybe a few people do believe him. He probably even convinces a few people to put a blindfold on themselves. Once they do, they freak out too and say, "Hey, you lied. I can't see at all." But Sid continues his lies and says, "Oh, you must have weak eyes because I can see extremely well. You must be an idiot if you put on a blindfold with weak eyes." And then everyone else faces the same temptation Sid originally did. And eventually there's plenty of people blindfolded. After years of this, people might even start blindfolding their own children in their cradles. So eventually, there's people around who never even knew what life was like without a red blindfold. And the lie keeps growing, fed by someone's pride and fear of rejection, and eventually you find yourself with your friends who are convincing you to walk into oncoming traffic. Now, this little story isn't the best, but it at least illustrates on a psychological level why people are motivated to lie and why they are motivated to cause others to perceive reality incorrectly, thus the world in which we live. Now back to our definition. An accurate perception of reality is not just essential to avoid devastating consequences, but is essential to experience happiness. Now, why is this? Well, like I said, we have instincts to survive, and one of those instincts is worry. Right? We worry about this, we worry about that. But interestingly enough, most of the things that we worry about are not realistic at all. In fact, one of my favorite philosophers, Seneca, said, "We suffer more in imagination than we do in reality." So from that, I've deducted, this is something I came up with, that the fabric of reality itself does not have the ability to provide you with as many difficulties as you commonly worry about. No, not even a tenth of them. We tend to experience difficulty exponentially less than we actually worry about the possibility of the difficulty. To every 1,000 worries, there is only one misfortune, and we worry way more than we actually need to. So, I'm going to wrap up this quick little video in saying that there is truth, that it is out there, that you can find it. In fact, if I were to say the first place you should probably start is the realization that you exist. And then start to segregate the things that you know into categories of things that you think might be the case and things that you believe versus things that you actually know to the level that you know you exist. It's a difficult process, and I will have some more videos in the future to help you get there and to hopefully help myself get there as well. But besides that, I hope you guys have a great evening. Thanks for joining.